Welcome to Steelers Breakdown featuring Penn Live Steelers beat reporter Nick Farbaugh, who is fresh from Atlanta, bringing back that Steelers win that was heavy on field goals, heavy on defense, and actually heavy on positive reviews for the Arthur Smith offense and also Justin Fields. And that has to be a record for Pittsburgh. They're actually liking their offensive coordinator. But what is interesting coming out of the Mike Tomlin press conference, where Nick was at earlier today, is this question of who is QB1 after Russell Wilson finally rehabs and recovers from this calf injury. It's looking like there will be no Wilson revenge game in Denver this Sunday, and it will be Justin Fields once again as QB1. And Tomlin was asked, well, if Wilson was healthy, would he still be QB1? And Tomlin, our loquacious coach, came up with an all-timer. I'm not going to soothe you with hypotheticals. So what does that mean, Mr. Farbaugh? Where are we at with this QB1 and QB2 among these guys?
Well, where they're at is their QB1 that's listed on the depth chart. They release a depth chart every week. It's right now Russell Wilson. He is not fully healthy, and it shows. I watched him in practice last Friday, John. This guy couldn't do a three-step drop. I knew he wasn't going to play in Atlanta. Then he went through his warm-up in Atlanta. Still didn't really move around. If he can't move around, there's no reason to start Russell Wilson. This is not like going from Patrick Mahomes to some scrub backup. These two guys are even enough to where it's okay to go with the backup option. And so that's a big part of it. Now, another thing he didn't do was soothe the idea that Russell Wilson is still the starter. As you mentioned, I'm not going to soothe hypotheticals. Yeah, he could have easily said, well, Russ, you can look at the depth chart. Russ is still listed as QB1. He is QB1 when he comes back. He didn't do that either. So that does say something about where they are with Justin Fields. I don't think, if Russ is healthy this week, I still would expect Russ to start. I think they're still there. I don't think he is going to be, though. You talk about calf injuries, John. They are hard to get down. They are hard to evaluate. Calf injuries re-injure as Russell Wilson's did. He felt like he was really good. He had been practicing for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden, one wrong step and boom. He restrains the calf. He's out. These are multi-week injuries, and if you injure them again, you were out. He's lucky he didn't really do even worse to it, because he said in his interview last Friday that it didn't get worse, really. It just kind of retweaked. So it basically was where it was when he hurt it at training camp. But if he goes out and plays and hurts it even worse, you're talking about a 4 to 6 week IR stint injury. I mean, the Steelers do not want that to happen. Or worse, you're talking about what happened to Aaron Rodgers last year, which is, that Achilles injury. We've seen calf injuries can lead to Achilles injuries, et cetera, et cetera. Look at what Christian McCaffrey's going through right now with the San Francisco 49ers. And so they're playing this very, very conservatively, and I don't think Russell Wilson's fully healthy. He's not going to practice tomorrow, which tells me he's not going to be fully healthy. We'll see how he moves. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. If he can't move, if he can't go under center and run a rollout or hand a ball off, et cetera, et cetera. If he looks like how Kirk Cousins looked, that's what Russell Wilson would have looked like if he had played. Kirk Cousins didn't move at all, didn't really run anywhere. That's what Russell Wilson would have looked like. You can't have your offense operating like that. And so that's really where it stands. And so Justin Fields right now, I think there were positives. I think there were negatives to his game on Sunday, but he did well enough, I think, to inspire confidence in what he can bring to the table. And certainly I think if Russell Wilson's not 100%, I think you start Justin Fields.
And I want you to sort of give us your rundown of what you saw positively and negatively for Mr. Fields. But also, I mean, there's a lot of the Pittsburgh Palace intrigue that goes attaches to the quarterback position. And the more we see of Justin Fields, and if we see more production that goes into the end zone, and we see his flashes of brilliance, in the being a running mobile quarterback, and we see him connecting on the long ball with George Pickens and having those plays become even more productive, could we be seeing him asserting control of that position even after Wilson is healthy? I think that's what everybody's wanting to know in Pittsburgh.
Well, I mean, if he plays well, sure. The door is open for the opportunity for him to grab that job, which is probably why Tomlin didn't declare Russell Wilson suddenly as the starter anymore, right? He didn't go and say, "Yeah, Russ is our starter 100%." He played the fence on it, right? You didn't really read much into that, but what you can read into that is the door is at least open for Justin Fields. But it's similar to the way when I remember last year where Kenny Pickett was starting to come back from his ankle injury and Mason Rudolph was playing. And, I think Tomlin is going to try and get Justin Fields some time to evaluate him. I think that would be important for them. But I also think if Russell Wilson comes out here on Thursday and Friday and looks great and they're ready to go, I think he starts. So I think that is what will happen if Russell Wilson looks great and is ready to go and he can move and all that, he can protect himself, all those things that come with that injury. I think he will start. So there's two sides to that coin, right? Where, there's opportunity to see what Fields can do, but also I think if Wilson's healthy enough and they see enough from him, he will start. But again, he's going to have to be, 95% up there, ready to roll, move in, all that. He's going to have to look like Russell Wilson in order to play. Because he wouldn't have looked like Russell Wilson if he had played against the Falcons. As for what I thought Fields did well and bad against the Falcons, first of all, man, you got to fix these snap issues when they go under center. I mean, two of them basically against the Falcons in the first two drives. You got to fix that now. He didn't have any the rest of the game, so hopefully you iron that out. But that has been a commonality with him from preseason game one to now. That's the first thing. That has to go. I don't typically blame center quarterback exchange on one person, so I think you can say that for both Fields and Zach Frazier. Both of them have to work on that, but Fields is part of that equation. He's 50% of it, so that's something that needs to improve. I thought in terms of positives, I thought you saw the physical talent, John. I mean, when he rolled out, specifically on that pass before halftime, when he rolled out to the opposite hash, flipped his hips and just fired a 40, 45-yard absolute laser to George Pickens. I know Pickens was wide open because it was a great route by George Pickens, but that thing was a laser beam. And that you saw the arm talent. He had two or three other throws. The one called on OPI was a great throw. The other deep pass to Pickens as well was really good. So the deep ball was really awesome. I love the deep ball. I think he made very good decisions in the passing game for the most part. I didn't think he put the ball in harm's way, which is, I think, the most important thing. Justin Fields has always been a chaos magnet in that he would be very feast or famine. I think the Steelers maybe didn't get as much feast. They got enough of it, and they got almost none of the famine, which is good. If you're going to win games like this with ball control and defense, your quarterback can't turn the ball over. And Justin Fields did not. He ran very hard. I thought he ran physically. I thought you saw the weaponry that he had when he put the ball in his hands. Just I think converting third downs, that 3rd and 7, I think on the first or second drive where there was nothing there and he turned up field and turned into an 8 or 9 yard run. First down. I mean, that's what he can do. The Steelers had 1 3-and-out all day, and I think, his legs were a big part of that. They sustained drives, dominated the time of possession, wore down the Falcons. It wasn't a flashy style of play, but, man, that's an old-school way, and that's how they want to win. And I think he executed that. What they asked Justin Fields to do, I think he did well. I also do think, the passing chart, John, you've probably seen it going around where none in the middle of the field. I thought there were a few plays that he could have ripped it to the middle of the field. There were some concepts there, but they also were actively avoiding Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons, who are great safeties for the Falcons, so I understand why, but I thought there were a few opportunities he could have ripped it. I think he still looks a little tentative there, sometimes to rip it over the middle of the field. They didn't really have much of a quick game with him because of that. He's kind of, second-guessing a little late on the hitch. So most of the plays were either the rollouts that they did, where he would dump it off, throw it across his body, 10 yards, et cetera, or the deep passing game. And so I would like to see him start ripping these balls in structured a little bit on these quick game stuff, because the Steelers didn't have any quick game at all outside of the rollouts. And teams are going to start kind of dialing in on that, I'm sure, eventually. So I would like to see that kind of manifest itself. So ups and downs. I think, though, for what they asked him to do, which was ball control, let the defense win the game, don't turn the ball over, and have a few splash plays here and there, he did a good job. And I think that biggest stat of the day that I will point out is the 0 turnovers. It means so much. Justin Fields had so many turnovers during his time with Chicago. That was a huge reason why they lost. The fact that he didn't have that variation in his play is really good news for the Steelers. If he can take care of the football, they can win games, because he's so dynamic on the ground. And you didn't even see that fully, right? You didn't even see him break a big one, because you know he can.
Projecting ahead to the Denver defense, what do you see as the opportunities for Arthur Smith and this emerging offense that we've seen with more play action and multiple tight ends on the field at one time, and for Justin Fields, who Mike Tomlin, as we sit today, is anointing the starter in this game? So what's going to be the opportunities for Smith, Fields, and the offense in Denver?
Right, if you're preparing like Fields is going to be the starter, and they are, and who knows, maybe Russ does end up starting if he surprisingly comes out. You do have to look, I think, at avoiding one man and one specific man in this secondary. You have to avoid number 2. That's Patrick Surtain, and Patrick Surtain is maybe the best corner in football. They cannot throw it his way. I know George Pickens went up against a very good corner in AJ Terrell. And he is their lifeblood in this game, and so they're probably going to naturally test Surtain a little bit, but testy waters. That's all I'm going to say. That guy is physical. He is great in press. He can go in off. He's got great ball skills. So that'll be something to watch. That is going to be the number one thing to watch. Can they attack Surtain or find ways around him to get George Pickens going? Crossers in this game. You want to see the middle of the field. This is the game where the middle of the field is going to be a big part of that, because they can attack these linebackers. They can attack these corners and safeties in the middle there. I think, last game you started to see a little bit of this, but you didn't see it completely. But you started to see a little bit of that Pat Freiermuth effect come in, right? They targeted tight ends a lot. I think 6 targets for the tight ends. All of them caught something. I think Pruitt had 2 catches. Washington had 1, and I think Muth had 3 or 4. But this is a game, where I think Freiermuth really sticks out as a big-time target for them, because they don't really have anyone to stop Pat Freiermuth at safety. Brandon Jones and P.J. Locke are solid players, but they're not Justin Simmons, which is who the Steelers obviously just faced. I think you can really look to exploit that. I think you can find a way to get Pat Freiermuth open, you do it. I also, if I were the Steelers, and this was something with all the quarterback talk that flew under the radar, John, Roman Wilson is going to get an uptick in practice participation this week. If he's active, and we're talking about these middle of the field crossing routes, that's his game. That's his game. He could be huge in this game. And, going up against solid stock corner and Jaquan McMillan, but I really like what he can do. I think Roman Wilson's a guy to really watch. So I think, that middle of the field is going to be a big part of it. This is a good edge rushing group. Jonathan Cooper, Baron Browning, and Nick Benito can really get after him. I like John Franklin Myers and DJ Jones as well. So the Denver front is decent. And Vance Joseph is a guy that has been around the block. So this is a defense that has a lot of veteran players on it. Not really super young, but as I mentioned, I think the middle of the field is going to be a big part of attacking the pass game. You're obviously still going to do a ton of run-heavy stuff, but I would like to see them attack the middle of the field on those crossers, because I just am not sure the explosives that they got against the Falcons are going to be there, because Surtain, I don't think they're going to face a better corner on their schedule than Patrick Surtain. I just don't.
And he'll be all over George Pickens, who is our splash play specialist. What about, you mentioned the middle of the field and the crossers going to be there, and Pat Freiermuth and maybe Roman Wilson too. But, given what you saw of Fields being a little gun shy in the middle of the field, and maybe not immediately seeing it or making the decision to throw the football, is there anything else they can do with him to sort of overcome that? while still being conservative with the football and the turnover thing.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Justin Fields is that he's never been a particularly great middle of the field passer. That's never really been his game, but not to the extremes that you saw against the Falcons. He usually would have targets there, but you also look at where he threw a lot of his picks, and it was to that area of the field. And so that's where the volatility came about. So they eliminated that. But there's a few ways to do it. One, I would get the RPO game going. I would try and run a lot of RPOs, see what you can do there. You have three options with Fields in the game. Either he can take it, the running back can take it, or you could turn it and throw it. That's what I would get going. I would also try and do these condensed sets, try and get free releases for some of these guys and get separation to where, Fields is a see it, throw it guy, which means if you have a guy that is wide open over the middle of the field and he sees it, he will rip it. So, he doesn't really throw with a ton of anticipation. So you're not going to get a ton of these anticipatory throws to the middle of the field, which is what kind of middle of the field throwing requires. You kind of have to throw it open to the window. But, if you can get guys free and have them win, that's why I say Roman Wilson is so huge. His speed across the field can create separation that I think Justin Fields will see and be able to rip it to. And same thing with Pat Freiermuth. I think, this is a guy you can run up the seam in this game. And it's a cover two heavy defense that they're going to face. So that's going to be open. And so the middle of the field is a really tough nut to crack because Arthur Smith's concepts primarily want to attack that area of the field, but Justin Fields is not great there. So obviously, I think being a good offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith tailored his game plan to Justin Fields. I think that was smart to do, but they have to get something in that area. And so I think, you would try bunch sets, condensed stacks, different things to get free releases for your wide receivers to try and get them open on the middle of the field. And then I would also rely on your tight end group. Maybe this is the game where Darnell Washington finally gets, some receiving upside because he's such a big time target. If you can just throw it up to him and see if he can bring that down. I would like to see, I think this is the big one, actually, the running backs. That's where I think they could get some really good production in the middle of the field, on angle routes or different things. They can get to the flat, but I want to see Najee Harris, Cordero Patterson, Jalen Warren, all of those guys get a lot of looks here in the middle of the field, just even on dumping it off, right? You can run clear outs and then the guy underneath just throw it to your back, different things like that. So you're probably going to see, a dink and dunk offense that's going to then try and explode and hit them down the field, just like you saw against the Falcons when they hit a few of those explosive plays. But you're going to have to attack a different part of the field probably this week. And so it's a tough marriage for Justin Fields and them. But I think those stacks as free releases, trying to get guys open so Justin is comfortable throwing those passes and not throwing them in danger is going to be big.
I like the involvement of the running backs that you mentioned. One thing we didn't see in Atlanta was a lot of Jalen Warren coming off that injury. Was that due to the injury, or was there something in the game plan that favored Najee Harris to such a great extent?
No, I think that was his injury. As Mike Tomlin said today in his press conference, he's healthy enough, but it would be a slippery slope to say he's fully healthy. I think that's how you would say it. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me completely if Jalen Warren took tomorrow off, with the hamstring injury. You're still in that danger zone with the hamstring injuries. You don't want to re-injure them. Hamstrings are really, really tough because, again, just like calves, like those are very easily re-injured. So the soft tissue injuries are tough. Now, Jalen Warren played a solid amount. I think he played 31% of the snaps. Najee Harris got, I think, 56%, and the rest went to Cordero Patterson. But when we saw Jalen Warren out there, John, it was mostly, pass protection. That's when they kind of put him out there, put him on pass obvious downs. Didn't really have him run a lot of routes. I think he ran 3 or 4 routes all game. He had 2 carries. He didn't really do that much in terms of that. And so I think that was trying to minimize, the re-injury risk. But he was a great pass protecting back, and he was a guy that was really stout in there and kind of held some of these pass rushers at bay when they held because they only sacked Fields twice. So that was another thing. They just cut off the negativity significantly. And so that's a big part of Jalen Warren obviously being out there. And Broncos are going to send blitzes too. They are a pretty blitz-heavy team. So you'll see it again. But, yeah, I think Jalen Warren will probably play more this week. Will he get more carries? He should. This is a style of defense that I think he's going to be really good against. So I think you're going to see more Jalen Warren, but we'll see.
Speaking of injury, we suffered a catastrophic one, losing punter Cameron Johnston for the season, just when Pittsburgh thought we had a punter who was perfect for our ball control, eat the clock, play defense style of football to win games. Who are they going to address in this position, and can he give us that same field position advantage that we were hoping for after we signed Cameron to the big bucks to really take care of field position for us?
Yeah, so they signed Corliss Waitman. If that name sounds familiar, it's because it is. He's been with the Steelers before. He was here in 2021, punted for 2 games with them that year. Did pretty good those 2 games. He was the punter for the Denver Broncos in 2022. And then last year was in a punting competition in New England, stayed on the practice squad for a lot of the year. This year he was in a punting competition with the Chicago Bears. But the Bears drafted Torrey Taylor out of Iowa. If you know anything about Torrey Taylor, he was not winning that job no matter what. So, Waitman's not a bad punter. If you're talking about free agents, he's got a few intriguing things. First of all, in those 2 games when he was with the Steelers in 2021, 52.1 yards per punt. Impressive. With the Broncos for his full year in 22, 46.6 yards per punt. I think it was about 42 net yards per punt. So, fine numbers, not great numbers, but also if you're getting a punter this late in the game, obviously kind of what you were looking for is fine. You don't need elite play from that guy. So that's what Waitman is. The different wrinkle, John, is that he's a lefty. And that actually it matters. That left foot punter is different. The ball comes off their foot a little different. It's a little harder to track for returners, and so sometimes it leads to more muffs. So something to watch. Also, he has holding experience with Chris Boswell. You saw, on that last field goal that the Steelers kicked against the Falcons, Scotty Miller had to be the holder. And congrats to him. He did a good job for it. But Waitman has experience there as the holder. So those are the things that are going to kind of bring about confidence with them. They're familiar with them. If he can do the job, that's what they need. They need him to be an average punter because they've been killed by below average punting over the past 6-7 years. It's been a while.
Well, I do like a lefty punter, and Bill Belichick, who knows a thing or two about football, loves lefty punters. So maybe we get a turnover out of that all odd ball coming down in an odd way off of that left foot. That would be fun. Let's talk about that defense. I mean, it was pretty smothering pressure. Of course, you mentioned Cousins really couldn't have the physical ability to move much. What did you see in that defense as it's been remade, and how is it going to match up against Bo Nix and the Broncos?
Yeah, interesting, right? So the interesting thing about basically everything that Bo Nix brings to the table is that he is like the polar opposite of Kirk Cousins. If you look at what the Falcons did, they played in pistol and shotgun every single snap, didn't go under center once, and didn't have play action once. They didn't move the pocket. The different with Bo Nix. Bo Nix can move. He's very athletic. He can extend plays. He can create with his legs and get first downs that way. Still doesn't really have a threat there. They will move the pocket. They will move launch points. They will run play action. They will go under center. So you're going to have more formational diversity, personnel diversity. But Bo Nix looked like a deer in the headlights against the Seahawks. I mean, he did not play well. 2 picks. John, he went 26 of 42, which sounds, I mean, not great, but you're like, okay, maybe he's got 250 yards. He had 138 yards. That's an NFL record for lowest yards with 25 or more completions. No one has ever had that little yardage. And the Seahawks defense is not as good as the Steelers defense. It's not. The Seahawks defense is a solid group. It's not what the Steelers have. The Steelers have superstars all over this group. And so Bo Nix, we'll see. He looked good in the preseason, but, he was more dink and dunk. And he was a guy that really struggled in this game to get it going through the air. And so you look at their stats in this game. I mean, 26 completions for 130 yards is only 5.3 yards per completion. I think his average depth of target was like 4 or 5 yards. It wasn't very much. So you're going to get a lot of quick game stuff. You're going to get a lot of plays in space. So tackling just going to be huge. Your corners are going to have to tackle. So ears perked up for the linebackers. Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson. I think the corners are going to be huge. Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson, Beanie Bishop. I throw Deshaun Elliott and KZ and Minka in there. These guys got to tackle in space because you're probably going to get a lot of those manufactured touches. And then the linebackers too have to be on their have their head on a swivel, and the edge rushers and defensive linemen can't lose contain because Knicks will run. And Knicks had a rushing touchdown in this game. So it is something to watch, no doubt about it. So you have to keep that in mind. But the Steelers really just have to worry about that mobility element. It changes a lot of things, but this offensive line for the Broncos, it's okay. It's not great. The Steelers have a big time advantage on the defensive line. They only averaged about 4 yards per carry, but Bo Nix had 7 yards per carry. And then you look at true running back attempts, and I think if you add the true running back attempts up, it's almost below 3 yards per carry. I mean, they did not run true runs very well. So it's an underwhelming offense. They got some weapons. I like Jaleel McLaughlin out of the backfield. Audric Estime is a nice rookie. And at wide receiver, they have Cortland Sutton, who's a big target. He's been around forever. Devon Vele has been a guy that's kind of really gotten a lot of buzz for them out of training camp. I think he was their leading receiver in terms of receptions on Sunday against the Seahawks. Yeah, he was. How about 8 receptions for 39 yards? Woof. That is a stat line. And so they have some talent, at the skill positions, but I think the Steelers have. It's kind of similar to what we talked about the Falcons, right? A lot of skill talent. I don't think they're quite as good as those skill talent guys, and it's not as good an offensive line as the Falcons had either. The Steelers should have a lot of the advantages here, but Bo Nix's mobility element is something new that we don't really know how the Steelers team's going to react to. But John, theoretically, they should be good against this. They faced Justin Fields all training camp. They should be good at this, and so that training should theoretically be reinforced this week when they're going up against those guys.
Good point. And we know that the NFL can have wild swings from week to week. A team looks like crap one week and then bounces back. But I truly hope the rookie QB in Denver is a deer in the headlights facing the teeth of that Steelers defense. So that should be fun to watch. Finally, we got to turn back to the offensive line, one of your areas of expertise. And I have to do a shout out. I mean, I was leery about another rookie center, but Zach Frazier, aside from those botched snaps, a couple botched snaps early on, really acquitted himself very well. But as you reported out of the Tomlin press conference, we have other injury concerns on that offensive line and maybe some more shuffling among that unit. So why don't you run down what's going on with this offensive line still in flux?
Yeah, Dan Moore Jr. now has an ankle injury because, of course, he does. All the tackles are banged up in some way now. We'll see what happens. If he cannot play, and it's possible, he's not going to practice tomorrow. And if he does not play, John, Broderick Jones to left tackle, and there comes Troy Falatanu, just healthy from his knee, right at right tackle. So shifting them around again, we'll see. Broderick Jones is still not healthy. I've told everybody that. Now, you didn't notice him on Sunday, which is good. He had the best game of the season, combining with the preseason, of course, of that so far. But he's going to be banged up still. So we'll see how that all goes. Again, I highlighted those edge rushers for the Broncos. I think they got a nice group there. So you're going to have to be on alert here if you're the Steelers. When you really look at this offensive line, it's just young. It's inexperienced. And it's been shuffled around so much. Isaac Seumalo has a chance to play. Mike Tomlin did keep the door open. I'm not expecting him to play yet. I think he might be back for the home opener. But if he's back, that's obviously huge for the Steelers. But you mentioned Zach Frazier, John. Man, he was awesome. Outside of the fumbled snaps, played at an extremely high level. Did not look like a rookie out there. You go back to the tape, and I thought I know a lot of people were praising the offensive line about how great they were. The Steelers did a nice job of helping them. They moved the pocket, as I mentioned. They kept Darnell Washington and other tight ends in. They kept Najee Harris and Jalen Warren in to help. Broderick Jones and Dan Moore and Spencer Anderson, all those guys, very rarely were they on an island, which is kind of what you need to do. And I expect very similar things probably this week. Arthur Smith does a really good job of helping his offensive line when they're undermanned. And so we'll see kind of what goes on here. But I think the offensive line is going to be probably the unit on this offense that improves the most over the year. I just think there's a lot of young guys that get better with experience. They got a lot of upside there. So they'll probably get better. But for now, they're really inexperienced. And we'll see. Again, it's a solid defensive line. It's a solid front for this Broncos group. And I think the 2 sacks, I don't even think the Steelers' offensive line was like beaten one-on-one. I think it was communication issues, which is exactly what you would expect with the inexperienced, shuffled through offensive line. So kind of get those out, pick up those blitzes, and I think you'll see the Steelers have find success there on the offensive line. The offensive line individually does not have to play elite if they're getting a lot of help. And Darnell Washington looked like an offensive tackle on Sunday, so maybe that's just your answer to some of this. And that's fine. So we'll see kind of what happens there. I thought they were good enough, and that's really what they needed against the Falcons. And so we'll see. I think this is going to be a group that gets better as the season goes on. I think Frazier was awesome, though. Frazier and Daniels played really well. Those two were clearly standouts.
Well, I like how your analysis really gives credit to Arthur Smith for earlier talking about how he helped Justin Fields get the most out of his game, but also now how they gave a lot of help to the offensive line, which has been riddled with injury and, like you said, inexperience to register what was a solid game for them. And hopefully they can mirror that in Denver. So you'll be out there, I know, in the Mile High City, and we'll be watching your tweets on social media and your posts on Penn Live. And we'll be back here next Tuesday afternoon after another Mike Tomlin press conference as we look back at what happens in Denver and look ahead to the home opener in Pittsburgh. See you then.